Hi, welcome to the new voting project. My name is Kanal, your host, still your host. And today we're here with Helen Butler, the executive director at Coalition for the People's Agenda, a nonprofit and nonpartisan organization comprised of representatives from the human rights, civil rights, environmental, labor, women, young professionals, I guess people like me now, elected officials, peace and justice groups, throughout the state of Georgia and some other southeastern states. You've also amassed a multitude of awards that would take the entirety of this interview to go over. So it's an understatement to have you here. Thank you so much for your time. I understand you're extremely busy and actually traveling right now. So thank you. We do appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Kanala. I'm really happy to be here with you. Excited to always learn from young people. I like working with young people.
Well, we appreciate your generosity. So yeah, let's dive into these questions. Just for the viewers, talk a little bit about your background. How'd you get into this? What drove you? And touch upon if you think college prepared you for the responsibilities you have today.
Well, let's see. How did I get started? I'm from a small town, and I went to this huge university. But while at the University of Georgia is where I went to school, I was one of the first 50 Blacks to attend that school at the Hamilton and Charlene integrated it. So that was an adventure for me because in itself, that was an advocacy statement. That was a statement of doing something for my community, making a difference where we hadn't been allowed to be there because of our skin color. I was able to attend, able to graduate. So while there, I did a lot of activities with the Blacks on campus because there weren't a lot of things that we could integrate into while we were there at the school. So we started our own Black Student Union. I was one of the founding members of the first Black sorority on campus because we couldn't pledge the other sororities. So I was always making a difference for paving the way, I guess you would say, changing the policies or doing things differently that would allow people like me to be engaged in college life. While there, I also went to graduate school, and while in graduate school, I worked in a community organization, a nonprofit organization, and there was this lady, Mrs. Melissa Tate there, who was a community activist, who was well known. When she spoke, people listened. She advocated fully for children, for making sure Black children in the neighborhood and in Athens, Georgia, were able to have quality kind of education. So she, along with Dr. Levine in the School of Social Work, who was on their board, I worked with them a lot in getting things done for daycare centers and Head Start programs in the Athens community to give them educational opportunity. While at Georgia, I also did a lot of direct action. We did a lot of things to change the way things were on campus. We didn't have Black professors, so we wanted Black professors, those kinds of things, Blacks on the football teams and all of that. So, Hosea Williams came down to University of Georgia because of some issues that were going on, not only at UGA, but in the city of Athens with regards to discrimination against Blacks. So we did a march. I participated in direct action. So I guess it really prepared me. While it prepared me for a career in corporate America, I also got the other side of the equation looking at public policy. Now, young as I was at that time, I didn't see the connection as I see it now. And so once I completed my career in corporate America, I came back to work at the NAACP state conference when my brother was president for 12 years. So that gave me the opportunity to again get engaged in making a difference for the community, dealing with public policy, getting to change public policy, and making sure our communities were active in participating in that. So I guess college did prepare me in some form of fashion for what I do now.
Well, that's great to hear. I guess activism runs in the family then.
Yes.
And that's great. I'm the lone, soldier, I guess, or warrior in my family. Everybody in my family is
Really?
STEM. They're all biologists and scientists or something. Yeah, great. Anyway,
Yeah, well, my brother was the first elected county commissioner in the county where I live now, Morgan County. He was that county commissioner for 25 years before he died. And he was the state conference president of the NAACP for 12 years. And then he also worked for AT&T Corporation. So all of that together. So I guess it was in the family, but he and I were particularly the only ones that really got engaged in a lot of this stuff.
yeah, I'm glad to hear that. And I guess a following question to that is now, as director of your organization, why focus so heavily on voting rights, in an age where everything is supposed to be universal, everything is supposed to be free. I say that in air quotes. Why focus on voting rights? And we'll follow this up later in the interview.
Right. Well, this organization was founded by the dean of the civil rights movement, Dr. Joseph Eccles Lowry. And he, along with Dr. King, so many of the John Lewis, C.T. Vivian, Dr. C.T. Vivian, Andrew Young, Rita Samuels, a lot of people you may not even know,
Right.
Coretta Scott King, all of those people were, I guess, put their lives on the line for voting rights. They made it possible that we would have Black people, especially, would have the opportunity to exercise our right to vote, to choose people that would represent us and have people look like us as our representatives. So it was when I met them and I joined the People's Agenda after I left the NAACP Voter Fund, I joined the People's Agenda by meeting Dr. Lowry. They had this Tuesday weekly meeting where all of their member organizations and individuals would come together, work on issues that were happening in the community together. So I joined with Reverend Orange. James Orange, of course, was one of Dr. King's lieutenants in the civil rights movement. So, and he also worked in labor. So it was an opportunity that I got to meet with all of these great legends, but understanding that they gave so much for us to have the right to vote. And voting is connected to everything we do. I mean, public policy impacts you from the day you're born to the day you die. So you got to be engaged in voting because an elected official makes that public policy. And if you don't have the right one, you get voter suppression, Jim Crow 2.0 like we do now. Right. So that's why voting is critical to me, because they gave their lives for it. I can at least give my service as a part of that to protect the right to vote.
Right. Yeah, that's inspiring. I don't know. I got nothing else. And I guess as part of the coalition for the People's Agenda, what are some of the core values and policy objectives that the organization as a whole is trying to amplify or to direct light onto? What beyond just voting rights, what is it that the coalition hopes to accomplish?
Well, we want to improve governance for our people. We want our people to have equal access, equity, to be able to enjoy all of the benefits that others in the United States are able to enjoy. We do a lot around criminal justice reform. A lot of our people are impacted by the criminal justice system. So we work around criminal justice reform. In fact, we have a committee, within the organization, we have committees that concentrate on certain issue platforms that we deal with. Our criminal justice committee really did this wonderful paper using the thing that Dr. King said, where do we go to from here? Looking at criminal justice reform, how do we make it better? How do we make it so that it works for our community and not that we're always adversely impacted by it, but we can use that system better for our community's safety, but rather than being racially profiled or killed as George Floyd was and so many others were. So how do we get those policies changed? So we've been working on getting citizen review boards established at local cities in Georgia. We were able to get that through Mayor Franklin when she was mayor of the city of Atlanta. It's an independent agency that reviews the activities of the police department, especially with regards to when they interact adversely to the community. So they get to review it. They have subpoena power to do investigation, to hold people accountable. So it's those kinds of policies that we're trying to get implemented otherwise. We do education. That's my number one issue. If I had to choose one, I want Black children and children of color to have equal, not necessarily equal, but equity in their education. I want the resources that are put into educational systems equitably distributed. Not that the north side of Atlanta gets better schools than the south side of Atlanta, where people of color live. I want them to have that opportunity. I want us to be able to have diverse teachers, to have diverse administrators, to really have good resources that will help our children really succeed and compete, not just in the US, but globally. So education is one of our values that we look at. The other is economic empowerment or economic justice. Dr. King's last pillow that he was working on was economic justice with the Poor People's Campaign. Yeah. How do you change that? How do you get minimum wage? How do I get access to contracts in the state just like other businesses do? How do we get to have equality in terms of economics? I mean, if you look at a community, you've got to have an economic base. We spend a lot of money, but it isn't spent in our communities. How can we bring it back to our community to make it better, to make it grow and thrive for children, our children, and not that we have to always live in poverty and be impacted? And I guess the other is environment and health. If you take a look at the environment from itself, from an equity standpoint of health issues, we've got to protect Mother Earth, right?
Right.
To be able to really live on this world. Water, we got to have clean water. We don't need our communities filled with waste facilities or nuclear reactors always built in our communities. So we want our environment to be sustainable, but good for our health purposes. Our health disparities are just astronomical in terms of what is impacting, how it impacts us. So we look at the environment. So those are the main four, I would say,
Mhm.
that we deal with. And we connect all of those issues to voting
Voting.
because
Yeah.
everything I've talked about is impacted by some elected official that makes a law about that issue.
Right. Yeah. I concur. Um, and it's very clear that the organization has a holistic approach to reform. And yeah, at the center of it is voting, but we'll get back to that. Don't worry. I guess I want to circle back to last year, 2020. It was pandemonium. Some would describe it once in a century pandemic, hyper polarized elections, some could argue mass corruption. What walk me through your thoughts on the 2020 election, what you observed, having been doing this for so much longer than me. um, you know Let me know, what do you think?
Well, doing this for decades, I have to say 2020 was the worst election cycle I had ever been exposed to. Number one, we had COVID, right? We normally, the way we get people engaged in the process is we touch them, we go out and meet with them, we have this face-to-face confrontation, coming together.
Right.
They trust us as trusted messengers. So we're out in the community working with them. But with COVID, we had to really pivot to do other things to even be able to communicate. We had to use a lot of social media. And of course, you all are really good at that. I'm not, but I have some young people on my staff that really know all the TikTok, the Instagram,
Yeah.
the Twitter, the LinkedIn, you name it. Okay, whatever new you all come up with,
Right.
they are on top of it. So they have to train us old people on how to do that. But that made us have to use different kinds of forms to really reach people. We did a lot of phone banking. We did a lot of texting. We did a lot of Zoom meetings. I was on Zoom from 8 a.m. in the morning to 8:30 or 9 or 10 at night, doing town hall meetings or doing meetings to explain why it was important. And on top of COVID, here again, and we had to try to be safe. How do we navigate that safely with our canvassers and with the people that work with us? We had to also deal with, we had new voting machines, right? That we had never used before. It had a paper trail. You had to scan it. There was a new way of doing it. Our all direct recording machines, at least they had gotten used to those where you just go in, insert your card and make your selection, look at it, review it, and push the button to release it, and you're done. You didn't see anything else. But now you had this piece of paper that you had to scan. You had to take it out, look at it, scan it, and make sure that it scanned and drop it into the bin. So it was a new process for voters. First time we're implementing it. And then, of course, no one could do a whole lot with voting because the Secretary of State kept changing dates.
Right.
First, it was going to be a presidential preference primary in March. It got changed to June. Then it got changed again. It's those kinds of things that created havoc.
I feel like the Secretary of State in Georgia really needs, a nice cleansing. But we can get to that a little later. Do continue. Yeah.
Well, I mean, he did do some good things. I have to give him credit what credit is due. Okay.
Yeah.
The number one good thing he did was mail out 6.5 million absentee ballot applications, right, to every voter. That's what got him in trouble with his party, let's say.
Right. Yeah.
But it was a good thing because that also gave people of color another means of voting that we had never used. We had used it, but we had never used it at the levels that we did in 2020. So mailing those absentee ballots. Now, the bad thing about that process, he used an out-of-state vendor in Arizona where they had to go and then come back to Georgia, which created problems with people not being able to know whether they got them or not. And they kept sending in additional ones. And that created work on your election workers and all of that.
Right.
And then the election workers didn't show up because they were cold. They were concerned about COVID. The average age of a poll worker is over 70. So, you know,
I'm a poll worker. I 70. I 70.
well, look, the average age now, I said, okay? So that means a lot of us are it's really not 70, it's 65, but you know, a lot of us are older age. So
right.
Yeah, we did a recruitment process for poll workers. We actually recruited over 700, almost 800 poll workers that we saw the need that the election offices would need new people. So we recruited poll workers. We actually trained our poll workers before they went to get the actual training with the state, because we wanted them to understand what it means to be a poll worker, what does the voters, how do voters see it, and get them to see from the voters' perspective. So even though you're learning the technical aspects from the Secretary of State or from your local board of election, there's a human customer side of it. How do you look at it from the customer side? And so, and of course, we always told them that whatever training they were told at the local board of election is the way you go. But in your mind, remember that you are trying to give the voter the best experience they can have in life. And so, and to keep them engaged in the process. So we did that. We recruited 800 poll monitors that we put on our election protection team to go out and assist voters so that they would actually be able to vote without problems. If they had problems like the polling location didn't open on time, they didn't have enough emergency ballots, if the machines didn't scan. We had a toll-free number, but our people were there to help them on site so they wouldn't get discouraged and leave. A lot of the organizations that we work with also were there to provide food, water for people that were standing in line for 9 hours, 6 hours to exercise their right to vote. But I think the best part I can say about the 2020 election experience was COVID helped people understand why it's important to have the right elected officials in office. If you looked at whether you're going to get your unemployment benefit or whether you're going to get some relief for COVID, that is determined by elected officials. And how do elected officials make those decisions? They get voted in office. And so you have to vote the right people in office in order to do that. And then the young people were out there in the streets and they voted in record numbers this time. They were protesting about police reform. They were saying defund the police, but you know, maybe they didn't mean defund the police. Maybe they meant looking at policing from a different perspective, giving them resources to really do safety, not criminalize people so much. So those confluence of issues and things that happened really made our election process turn out. We had record turnout in 2020 and 2021. So it paid off for us. What can I say? Yeah. 2 US senators were elected that changed history for the US.
Right.
not just
Yeah.
Georgia.
Yeah. No, Georgia was a state we were all looking at in the election. Trust me. I have several organizing, friends and buddies who I've worked with in the past. They went to Georgia to knock doors. I unfortunately didn't have that luxury. But no, Georgia was critical to where we are now. So thank you again for your efforts. Like I said at the beginning of this video, it would take too long for me to like conscribe, each and every effort you've done, and
Yes.
reward a mass. So thank you again. So moving on to my next question. It's fairly simple, and it's one I like to ask all the interviewees, which is, how important is voting? Um, and some folks take a long time to answer this question. So, hit me with your best shot, because I want the viewers to understand the significance, the power of voting.
Well, I don't know anything that is more critical than the vote. And with the suppression laws that have been placed, the barriers
Right.
that have been put in place to stop people from voting, that tells you the vote is important, right? The vote is critical. If you don't, it's really your power. I mean, your power to change the outcome and the destiny of your communities. Municipal elections are coming up, right? The mayor and the city council determines whether your streets get paved, what kind of sanitation pickups you get, right? They also hire the police chief, right? And so it's really critical that that vote is so powerful, because it can change everything for your life. Just look at what it did for the US with just electing 2 US senators, right?
Right.
We were able to get the kind of relief plans for COVID, right? Before then, oh, COVID's gonna go away. It's gonna go away in June. It's gonna go away. It doesn't matter. It
Still hasn't gone away, actually.
right, and it's still here, right? Yeah. But pushing people to get the vaccination so that you are not unemployed, right? Making sure you have a rescue plan where you can get unemployment benefits, so you can get rental assistance or housing assistance in the pandemic. It's those kinds of things that elected officials are responsible for, that you got to have the right ones that will do that for you right now. The infrastructure plan that we're trying to get right now, right. How important is an elected official? They're critical to that, because whether we can get our bridges repaired will be determined by these elected officials. And we just saw a bridge just collapse not too long ago, right?
Right.
I know in Atlanta, one was caught on fire by an accident, and then it had to be rebuilt. So those kinds of things are made, whether those policies get done or whether those services get done, is made by a decision of an elected official. So to me, it is critical, because it's your power to control who gets to represent you and who gets to make those policies. And when the person doesn't do what they're supposed to do, then you have the power to fire them, because elected officials are really our employees.
They're our public servants.
That's right. Yeah. And we tend to think it's the other way around or something. Yeah. But they work for us.
Yeah.
And so I used to be a VP of HR. So, when you're in human resources, if you try to work with your employees, if they need a little more training, they need a little more development, you try to give them that. But if they don't, then you coach them. And it eventually, if they still don't come around, what you have to do with them? You have to fire them and get you some more. Right. So the same principle applies to our elected officials. And that's why the vote is critical. And I know that's a long answer.
No. It's actually the answer. As somebody who spent the last 3 years working in politics, I give to everybody, because most folks don't cognizantly realize that when you talk about, defunding the police, when you talk about criminal justice reform, when you talk about environmental justice, unfortunately, the federal level, the president of the United States, the vice president, they don't handle that operation. Your local municipalities do. I've ran several city council campaigns. I could tell you for a fact they manage the budget. Not only that, the county does in some cases. My county manages billions of dollars, some dedicated, a large portion dedicated to the sheriff's office. The sheriff is an elected member of our community. You can hold him accountable. The DA has so much more influence than anybody can understand. They have the power to really change things. This is why I'm on a district attorney's campaign. Check out my channel if you want to see the candidates I'm supporting. But the point is, local politics, it touches you. It's like touching you physically and figuratively. Federal, likes to amplify all the issues and connect people together. But the reality of it is, voting, even if you're disillusioned, even if you recognize it's hyperpolarized, maybe my vote doesn't count, voting at the local level is the single most important act of service you could perform for a community. And I try to explain that in the best possible way. And I see that, you've been doing this for so much longer, you probably got it now, and it took me years to understand that.
But you got it, because look at what the one instance you talk about, just the district attorney. Ahmaud Arbery was killed in Brunswick, Georgia, right? Just casually jogging through his neighborhood to be healthy, right?
Right.
And of course, the DA didn't want to prosecute it. But guess what? The people in Brunswick said no more. In 2020, they said, we're going to get rid of that DA. And they got another DA that actually would prosecute. So it's that kind of involvement that people have to understand the connection with.
Now let's talk about Georgia. Your home state, you're born there. And you do obviously do a lot of organizing there. Kind of take me through the, we hear it on this side, SB 202 or something, voting rights restrictions, limiting the amount of absentee ballots, the access to ballots, even poll workers, who are supposed to be nonpartisan, getting punished for volunteering their time. Tell me why this is happening. And give it to me straight. What can we do to assist and reform? Because it's obviously a reaction to the 2020 election.
And you hit the nail on the head. It was just a reaction of some people who didn't like the outcome of an election. And they want to change democracy. They want to change democratic processes here in the United States. SB 202, the most egregious part, I know we talk about not being able to give water to people in line, standing in line. We talk about the reduction in the absentee ballot days, how you have to provide an ID to even apply for an absentee ballot. And some people in rural Georgia don't have internet capability. So how are they going to do it? The Secretary of State just promulgated a new form for absentee ballot that says you can email it and upload it. Okay, if I don't have internet, how can I upload it and email it to the office? So that leaves me only with mail, and then mail is unreliable. People in rural Georgia, Savannah's mail goes to Florida and then comes back to Georgia. So, it's those kinds of things. But the most egregious part of SB 202 is the takeover process. And most people don't get that takeover process. But if I don't like the way a certain county has been voting, and I can find an error, and everybody makes an error. I don't care which county you are. No county is perfect, okay?
Yeah.
You'll find some problem that you can say is a problem, but it's not fraud or anything like that, because we didn't find any fraud. The number, we had 2 audits and 1 recount. So 3 times it was hand counted ballots, all of them. And the number came up just about the same. And so the part where the state legislature and the state election board can take over a county's election process, remove the board, remove the supervisor, and appoint some person who's never done this stuff to administer elections.
Right.
So people don't.
And just to clarify, I think that happened to you, correct? I had
That's
watched.
correct.
I watched a clip of you and I believe a colleague of yours who was a Republican who denounced the Trump administration, and you were removed from the county board of elections.
Correct.
If you want to talk about that.
Correct. I mean, but I don't want it to be about me. I want people to understand the process, okay? Right. We were responsible for implementing the laws for elections. We determined where the polling locations would be. We determined if we could do additional hours. We determined which absentee ballots didn't get rejected. We determined which provisional ballots got counted. We certified the election, right?
Right.
So if you have someone from the outside come in and take over, who's never done this, and who so happens to be someone with the crazy thought process, like, it was fraud, so I'm not going to certify the election. I'm going to just do this other thing that somebody else is telling me to do. Is that fair to all the voters who exercise their right to vote? No, it isn't. But that's what they're doing. And there are 2 processes to take over the board. One was SB 202, which this is my assessment. SB 202, which was the Jim Crow 2.0, takes over the large boards, large county boards of election, like Fulton, like DeKalb, like Gwinnett, like Cobb. So SB 202 says only 4 boards can be taken over at any one time, okay? So if I can take over those 4, and those are certain, and I'll just be honest, Democratic performing counties, okay? And I take over that and make it harder. I decide whether I'm going to accept the results. I may change the results. Wow. I may not let certain people's votes be counted. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that can change the outcome of any election. So SB 202 does that for the large counties. For the smaller counties like my county, they use what you call local legislation. That means my state representative and my state senator got together, introduced a law to reconstitute the board, because I didn't like the way that board performed.
Right.
The one I was on, and I've been on it for 10 years plus, right. And we never had a violation of the state, never been brought before the state election board for a violation of any of the laws. So we must have been doing something right as a board, right?
Right.
But yet they wanted to remove us and have a county commission, which is predominantly Republican, remove us. And even though the process before had been bipartisan, In other words, the Republicans had two, the Democrats had two, and the county had one to make it an odd number, as Robert's rules say you got to have an odd number, right?
Correct.
So we followed all the rules. We worked together, as I said, to certify the elections, do everything we were supposed to do, but yet the county didn't want to remove us. And there was really no reason, and they gave no reason, other than to say we were dysfunctional. And I'm going like, what do you mean we're dysfunctional?
Right.
When we certified every election, we never had a violation. We
Right.
never had a complaint before the state election board. So what does that mean?
Yeah.
You know, so it was just trumped up, and there are 10 other counties that were impacted the same way. So that's a way that 10 counties plus 4, that's 14 counties out of 159. And I know if they take over Fulton County, which is the largest demographic for full Democratic voters, just think how you can change the outcome.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's tough. I'm sorry that you lost your.
Need help from you all. I mean, you can help us put pressure on Congress to
Yeah.
pass S1 HR 4. DC statehood gives us 2 additional senators. You know, we've got to have the Voting Rights Act pre-clearance put back in place, because redistricting is coming up, right?
Yeah.
And that means our majority Republican legislature can now draw the lines any way they want to draw. They can pack us all in one district and not give us representation that we desire or want. And so it's that kind of thing that people have to understand what's at stake. And that's the sense of urgency for Congress to act at this point.
Yeah, no. If you happen to know any of them, I'd be more than happy to bring them on the show and teach them a valuable lesson about voting and gerrymandering. But thank you so much. I guess in closing, I always ask, you know, our generation, my generation is called Gen Z. Still don't know where they got Z from. What would be your advice to us? You know, how do we impact voting, elections, the policies we care about, staying engaged? What do we do? You know, we're the next class of, you know, graduating voters. We're the next class of people who are going to inherit all the problems created in the past. What do we do?
The first thing you got to do is be engaged at every level. You all have really showed up in the 2021 election in Georgia, I know, and in 2020 as well. You saw what criminal justice does, how it can be reformed, but you know that the way to get that done is through elected officials. Run for office. We need you to run for office.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Do I have your endorsement? That's
You can be the difference.
yeah.
If you look at the 1965 Voting Rights Act, Dr. King was 38 years old. I know that's a millennial probably.
Right.
But again, think about how young they were. John Lewis was younger than that when he started with SNCC. Okay.
Bob Moses was young.
Exactly. And those were all great people that worked in the civil rights movement to get the 1965 Voting Rights Act passed. And today is the anniversary of that, when Johnson signed that into law. And I came to Washington, D.C. in 2006 to witness George Bush sign the last reauthorization of that act. So, but to me, you young people, you can do it now. You're doing it now. Just get more of you engaged in that process and just take your place. No one has to hand it to you. Just take it. Listen and counsel with the older people, but you all know a lot of things that you can teach us. I mean, you have a different way of communicating than we ever did. Dr. King would be amazed at how you all communicate on the internet using all those tools. Just think they had a copier, maybe,
Right.
to do their work, you know? Some said a mimeograph, and I don't think you even know what that is.
I mean, I could assume. Right? But yeah, no, message well received. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Just put your foot in the door and keep walking, I guess.
You all are brilliant, and I have faith in you that you're going to make it right.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you have faith in just me, because I will make it right.
Yeah. I mean, everything, immigration, no matter what we try to do, everything is connected. So, we've got to really, you all just have to get on it. That's what I say. Just be more on it.
Right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. How can viewers stay updated on your platform, what you do day in and day out, unless they're catching you on CNN? How can people stay updated on what you do?
Well, you can, of course, go to thepeoplesagenda.org. www.peoplesagenda.org is our website. And we meet every Tuesday from 12 to 2. And join our list, and we'll update you for those meetings. We have weekly empowerment meetings from across the state, and they've really much better than when we were in person, because doing it by Zoom, we've reaching so many other people across the state that can come in, not necessarily in person, but be there with us. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, TikTok. We have the Black Youth Vote for the young people 18 to 35 that want to work and give us strategies. Not that we're going to give you strategies, but give us strategies that we can employ to be the change in our communities. Our Black Youth Vote director is Mary Pat Hector. She's one of the young, she's been an activist since she's 10 years old.
Wow.
She ran for office at 19 for a city council position, lost only by 200 votes.
Wow.
That was 200 young people on her block that probably could have voted for her.
Right.
It's that critical, but she hasn't given up. She's going to law school now. So we need young people to help guide us and to help us make the plan for your future, because I've had my future. It's your future that we're working for.
Right. Yeah. And we appreciate that. Like I said, thank you so much for coming on the show. You're more than welcome to come back anytime you want to talk about the People's Agenda and any other initiative that y'all undertake. We do appreciate your insight, your time. We know you're a busy person, so thank you.
Well, thank you for having me, Kanal. I really appreciate it, and I love talking to you.
Of course, anytime. Thank you so much, Helen.
Thanks.
Peace out.